So first of all, I'd private message them, just ask them a few questions on what's on their profile page.
Would you have a look first at what's on there?
Yeah.
Colin Bidwell is a victim of terrorism. He's been paid to go on Facebook using a fake profile and message extremists. It's part of a project funded by Facebook themselves.
I just let them know, but I don't want to kill anybody. I'd like to talk to people to work the issue out. In my case, I should hate Muslim extremists. I'm lucky to be alive. So I thought now I'd open up and maybe explain about me.
On holiday in Tunisia in the summer of 2015, Colin saw dozens of people shot dead on the beach he was sunbathing on.
Someone firing a gun.
Bullets flying everywhere. And I had a lucky escape on that day. A lot didn't, but I did. For some reason, I'm here today. Be nice to people, whatever your beliefs or religion. For me, it's simple.
For this project, researchers found people posting both extreme Islamist and far-right material on Facebook. Colin was tasked with talking to the people posting the extreme Islamist content, people who may support the killer on the beach in Tunisia, and challenging their views.
I just keep saying it, you can have your extreme beliefs and everything, but when it gets to the extreme violence, that's the bit I can't understand.
I understand the issues that are upsetting you.
Sadia's been doing the same. She's a former extremist herself. We've changed her name to protect her identity.
But is this the way forward?
And what sort of thing was on the profiles of the people you were speaking to?
A lot of them were pictures of ISIS flags, and they had a lot of lions with the memes, the ISIS memes on them.
There have been a series of high-profile cases of far-right and Islamist extremists radicalised online. Big tech companies like Facebook have been taking a kicking from politicians saying they have to do more to stop extremism littering their sites. For this project, Colin and Sadia were known as intervention providers. There were 11 of them, and they fell into 3 categories: former extremists, survivors of terrorism, and trained counsellors. This was a pilot project by an organisation that specialises in extremism, called the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, or ISD.
First of all, we identified Facebook pages where people were expressing support for extremist groups and posting extremist content. We then used software to analyse the ways in which people were engaging.
The researchers would then manually look at Facebook pages to select people posting very extreme, far-right and ISIS-supporting content. What was the bar for someone to be targeted, to be chosen for this?
So we'd look for people who were using the most violent, most hateful, most dehumanising language towards others, suggesting that whole communities need to be killed, need to be eradicated.
Allah followers are criminals and need to be annihilated. In all, 569 people were contacted on Facebook. 112 people replied. 76 had a sustained conversation. An ISD claimed that 8 people showed signs that the conversation had a positive impact. This is small numbers, experimental. What was it for you that says it did work?
The levels of sustained engagement that we saw across these categories of individuals that we were reaching out to are extraordinary. We were trying to fill a really big gap in responses to online recruitment and radicalization. And that gap is in the direct messaging space. There's quite a lot of work being done to counter general propaganda with counter-speech and counter-propaganda and the removal of content. But actually we know that extremists are very effective in peer-to-peer direct messaging, and that's how they're most effective. And yet there's no systematic work being done to reach out on that basis, on that direct engagement basis. That's the gap we were trying to fill.
Just worried about the future for my children with all this violence that's online. The first contact I can remember it was just so intense. I thought someone was going to jump out the screen, or there was going to be a bang at the door and someone was going to try and attack me. You know, it really did frighten me, my first contact, when I got a reply.
Do you think you're qualified to do this kind of work?
I think I was a little bit entitled to do what I did after what we've been through and still going through. That if there was the smallest chance that I could make some form of difference or awareness, for me, I'm in. I'm in. I think I'm entitled to ask those questions. Why would someone want to take another one's life, especially if they're innocent? Yeah.
That is different though, isn't it? Justification and qualification.
Yes, it is. It is. I'm certainly not qualified. I know I did quite well on the programme, but maybe because everything was genuine. I was asking from me. You know, I wasn't taking it from a book. I was taking this from experience.
It's always me thinking, how would I speak to me, and what would have made me change my views. I had quite radical views when I was in my teens. I felt voiceless. I felt as though there was an injustice that no one was addressing. And I can really relate to these young people.
This project has raised serious concerns for privacy campaigners. They're very worried about Facebook, a website that advertises itself as a place for friends to connect, is funding this kind of what they call surveillance.
Based on the headlines, people might find it quite attractive because it does seem to be a way to counter something that people are very worried about. But you need to be very careful when you're dealing with issues that really concern the public in terms of their fear of extremism, their fear for their own physical well-being and that of their family, whether these things actually are effective. I think it will make people sceptical about the role of social media organisations. It will make people who are concerned about surveillance and aware of the many ways that it can happen, either by companies or by governments, more suspicious. Like when are you not being monitored?
Millie is especially worried about the fact that Facebook funded a project that broke its own rules and created fake profiles for this work.
To now allow fake profiles and people to infiltrate groups and then speak to people changes the whole dynamic of what Facebook is about.
Facebook didn't give the people running this project any special access to the site, but they did fund it, though they won't tell us exactly how much they spent. It's part of their wider efforts to do something about all the extremist material on their site. At one of Facebook's London HQs, I met their UK public policy manager. Katrin, nice to meet you. So this way?
Yeah.
You allowed fake profiles to be made for this work, which is against your own rules. How did you justify that?
So it is against Facebook's rules to use fake accounts on our platform, and we wouldn't advise anybody to do so, even if they're engaged in this kind of activity, not least because our tools may well disrupt their activity.
But it's confusing, right? Simultaneously disrupting some, allowing others. It makes the rules very unclear.
So I would say that we don't allow fake accounts on our platform, and we don't advise people to use fake accounts at all in any circumstances, because they will be disrupted.
But you did here.
As I say, the research techniques, exactly what the researchers did in this circumstance was done independently of Facebook. We provided advice and support on how they could, for example, communicate with people, what the kinds of trends we were seeing, and we provided resourcing in particular to this organisation to do this work. But the research techniques and exactly what they did is a matter for them.
The Prime Minister has said recently that she wants extremist content removed from Facebook within 2 hours. This project relies on that extremist content to stay there. How do you balance those two things?
And we are completely aligned with her in the fact that we must remove that content as quickly as possible from our platform, because it can circulate very, very quickly, and we know that the damage that it can cause. It's never going to be enough simply to take down content, because there are always going to be either grey areas, but more importantly, there's going to be people who are tempted and interested in that path, regardless of what content we take down, and actually finding ways to engage with those people is really, really important.
While running this project, there are a number of instances when researchers came across content or views that were very extreme, and they had a protocol for dealing with that.
I think there are concerns over who exactly is carrying out this work. Even if the organisation itself may have been involved in doing research over many years, does not mean that they're qualified to carry out this sort of quasi-law enforcement surveillance role.
How do you know you weren't making things worse? You could create an environment where people are even more suspicious of organisations like yours.
Firstly, we're not government, we're a civil society organisation, and I do believe that there's an absolute need for more civic response to hateful ideologies. These are people posting publicly, again, not privately, publicly. That's Speaker's Corner. They're coming out on public pages and saying things like, all Muslims are a virus and need to be stamped out. So you can either censor that, and perhaps they go off and into a sort of underground space online and become even more activist and radicalized. You can ignore it, and it will fester, and it will likely grow, and we see it growing. Or you can try and engage it to see if you can walk them back from the edge.
Did you have people ask detail about who you were, basically who you were working for, what you were doing?
The strange thing is that most people didn't. There was almost this immediate trust. I was coming from a genuine place, but it was worrying that there's so many people out there that are not. Hence the possible reason that recruiters of Daesh have been so successful.
But they didn't know that obviously their conversations would be seen by an organisation like ISD, and that they'd be part of a research project.
No, nobody asked anything of that nature, but I did say that I was there to try and dissuade them from holding those particular views because they are dangerous. They didn't know the research part of it, no.
If someone being spoken to specifically asked, the intervention providers would admit that they were working for ISD, but they wouldn't say that up front. Every time someone found out that the person they were talking to was working for you guys, every single one of those didn't want to talk anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
That shows this is not consensual.
There's a lot of stuff that happens on social media that isn't necessarily consensual. Again, these are not individuals we've reached out to because we've somehow had a look under the bonnet into private spaces. We have access to, and we see whatever you're able to see online, whatever any member of the general public is able to find online. These are public postings. This is Speaker's Corner. When they asked explicitly why they were being engaged in this way, we always told them the truth, which was that this was part of a program that we were running to counter extremism.
If they were pushed on it, they would admit, but initially they would try and carry on the conversation using the fake identity. And if I'm speaking to someone using a fake identity, it's deception.
So again, they were speaking to their personal experiences. And so I push back on the idea that this is real deception. These are all individuals speaking to their own real life experiences, reaching out on an empathetic basis to engage in dialogue. So in that sense, I don't think it's deception, but you're absolutely right that these are challenging issues.
Going into people's Facebooks using a different identity. Do you see why this kind of work will be very controversial?
I can see why it would be, but we have to be in this space if we're going to challenge these views, which are extremely dangerous. We need to use people's expertise to try and be at the very place in the very heart of where radicalisation happens. If we're not there, then it will get worse. It's a cancer and it needs to be tackled.